Welcome to Conspiracist.
Great to be here.
Today, we're undertaking a deep dive into a really compelling hypothesis. The idea that governments, perhaps around the world, have intentionally concealed evidence of, well, time travel cover-ups.
Ah, yes. That's a fascinating and persistent one.
It really is.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of material to look at today, covering it from quite a few angles.
Right. So we'll be looking at conspiracy theories generally, I suppose.
Exactly. Their nature, how they work, but also specific alleged incidents, claims of actual time travelers.
And the physics, too. The theoretical side.
Definitely. How time travel might work, theoretically, and even how it sometimes gets linked with other phenomena, like UFOs.
That intersection is always interesting.
It is. Now, our aim today, just to be clear, is to keep a strictly professional, objective stance.
Absolutely. Analyzing the evidence, the reasoning.
Behind these claims of government concealment, exploring the ideas themselves, but, without humor or just dismissing them out of hand.
Agreed. It's a complex topic that deserves careful consideration. So, where should we start? Maybe with the idea of conspiracy theories themselves.
Sounds like a good place, because a lot of these claims are built on that foundation, aren't they?
They really are. I mean, a conspiracy theory, fundamentally, it's an explanation for something.
Right.
It's often a big event, attributing it to a secret plot, powerful groups, sinister motives.
Even when other explanations seem, well, more likely.
Exactly. And what's key, I think, is how they often operate without or even despite concrete evidence.
That's crucial. This resistance to being disproven. Our sources suggest they're remarkably resilient. Evidence against the theory.
Or just a lack of evidence for it.
Right. It gets turned around, seen as proof of how effective the cover-up is.
It's a kind of circular logic, isn't it? Makes it very hard to challenge based purely on facts.
Definitely. And there's a historical context, too, right? The term itself is relatively recent in common use, mid-20th century.
Roughly, yeah. But the idea of explaining things through hidden plots, that's much, much older.
So what's the appeal? Why did these explanations stick?
Well, several things, maybe. They can offer simple narratives for complex, maybe scary events.
Like imposing order on chaos, assigning blame.
Precisely. Dividing the world into sort of good versus evil. And there's also the appeal of having, secret knowledge, being in the know.
Right, that feeling of exclusivity. But there's a darker side, too, historically.
Oh, absolutely. Links to prejudice, propaganda, sometimes even violence. That's an important thing to remember.
Okay, so keeping that context in mind, let's shift to time travel specifically. The Montauk Project comes up a lot.
It does. A whole collection of theories, really. Secret experiments, Montauk Air Force Station, involving time travel, psychological warfare.
But the evidence. What do our sources say about actual proof?
That seems to be the sticking point. There's a real lack of credible, verifiable evidence.
So the claims about advanced tech manipulating electromagnetic fields for time travel.
They run counter to mainstream physics, where time travel is still very much speculative, highly theoretical.
So why Montauk? Why has that story gained traction, do you think?
Hard to say for sure. Maybe it taps into that fascination with military secrets, hidden technology.
And government overreach, doing things the public doesn't know about.
Could be, yeah. Which kind of leads into another strange intersection. The time traveler UFO hypothesis.
Right. I find this one particularly interesting. The idea that UFOs aren't aliens.
But humans. From the future.
Exactly. Our descendants may be coming back to study us or observe.
Michael Masters proposed something like that, didn't he? That UFOs are basically future anthropologists in their field vehicles?
Yeah. And Nick Pope apparently linked some specific UFO cases, like Rendlesham Forest, to this idea, too.
It's certainly an alternative to the extraterrestrial hypothesis. It avoids the whole interstellar travel problem.
True. But it brings its own challenges, like how do they avoid changing the past? The paradox issue.
Always the paradox issue. Which brings us to individuals who claim they've time traveled. Andrew Basiago, for instance.
Ah, yes. The lawyer claiming involvement in a secret government program. Project Pegasus.
That's the one. He alleges physical time travel and a decades-long cover-up.
But the evidence for Project Pegasus itself, what's the story there?
Well, it seems documented mentions of a government project with that name are hard to find before his claims surfaced. Interestingly, though, there was a Project Pegasus in Marvel Comics back in the late 70s.
Oh, really? That's curious, given the timeline.
It raises questions, doesn't it, about influence, memory, verification.
It certainly complicates things. And there are other threads, too, like the alleged 1943 time travel breakthrough.
Linked to making a battleship invisible. The Philadelphia experiment narrative, essentially.
Right, and sometimes tied to bizarre side effects, like accelerated aging.
These details add layers to the lore, but again, verifiable proof is elusive.
Which leads to the big question. If any of this is real, if governments did have time travel, why isn't it obvious? Where are all the time travelers?
Good question. And the communities discussing this have theories, of course.
Like what?
One popular idea is branching timelines. Traveling to the past doesn't change our past, it just creates a new, separate reality.
So no paradoxes in our timeline and no visible travelers popping up here.
Potentially, yes. That's one way to resolve it, theoretically.
What else?
Well, maybe there's active cleanup, subsequent travelers, or even some kind of time police erasing evidence.
Like in science fiction.
Or perhaps travelers are restricted somehow, only allowed to observe, not interact.
That would limit their impact, certainly.
We also have to consider maybe we just don't recognize the evidence, or maybe travel is only one way to the future.
That would neatly explain the lack of visitors from the future, wouldn't it?
It would. Lots of possibilities if you start from the premise that it's real but hidden.
Of course, not all claims are presented as real events, even if they seem convincing. We have things like hoaxes or maybe just storytelling.
Exactly. The John Teeter story is a prime example. Hugely influential online phenomenon.
Right, claiming to be a soldier from the future.
But widely considered now to be an elaborate fictional narrative.
Right.
Very compelling, but likely fiction.
And then there are the photos, right? Alleged time travelers caught on camera.
Yes, those pop up frequently. But often, closer examination provides, well, less exciting explanations.
Like the hipster in the 1941 photo.
Yeah, the sunglasses, the printed t-shirt look. Turns out those styles and items, or very similar ones, were actually available back then.
Okay. And the cell phone in the old film footage.
Often identified as an early portable hearing aid, or in one case, a type of box camera held to the ear. Misidentification.
So critical examination often debunks these.
Frequently, but not always easily. There are still some odd cases, like that Sergei Ponomarenko story from Kyiv.
The man claiming to be from 1932, with photos apparently from 2050.
That one remains puzzling. Less easily dismissed, let's say.
Okay, so moving away from specific claims and photos, let's touch on the deep, fundamental problems, the paradoxes. The grandfather paradox is the classic one.
It really is the core logical tangle. Go back, prevent your own birth. How can you exist to have gone back in the first place?
It makes your head spin. It seems like a fundamental barrier.
It does from a classical logic perspective. But theoretical physics, sometimes it offers weird potential loopholes.
How so?
Well, some research looks at things like closed time-like curves, paths through space-time that loop back on themselves.
Okay.
And the idea is that maybe physics, particularly thermodynamics and quantum effects, behaves differently on these curves.
Differently how?
Speculatively, things like entropy, the arrow of time, essentially might fluctuate or even reverse locally. Quantum fluctuations could potentially smooth out paradoxes.
So physics itself might prevent paradoxes from actually forming.
That's one highly theoretical possibility being explored. It's really out there, physics-wise.
But it suggests it's not automatically impossible. Some physicists even think human time travel might be possible this century.
Some do, yes, based on these kinds of theoretical explorations. And then there's the quantum idea that the past isn't necessarily fixed. The idea that the universe might not have one single history, but maybe a superposition of many possible histories. What we observe now influences which past history becomes real.
So interacting with the past might just select a different history, not create a contradiction within a single one.
Again, highly speculative, but it's another way some physicists think about reconciling time travel with causality. It suggests the past is, well, fuzzier than we think.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, from the psychology of belief
to specific alleged incidents, hoaxes, paradoxes.
and cutting-edge, very weird physics, all circling this central idea of a government cover-up of time travel. What stands out to you as the main takeaway from all this?
For me, it's the sheer power of the idea of time travel. It taps into something deeply human, doesn't it? The desire to revisit the past or see the future.
Definitely.
And that desire, combined with a natural distrust of powerful institutions, creates this space where stories of hidden knowledge and cover-ups can really flourish.
Even without solid proof.
Especially without solid proof. Because, as we discussed, the lack of proof can itself be woven into the narrative of a successful conspiracy.
It's a self-sealing argument in some ways.
It can be. which makes objectively evaluating the claim of a cover-up incredibly difficult.
So, reflecting on everything, the theories, the debunked claims, the persistent mysteries, the physics, what's the most thought-provoking part for you? Does the lack of concrete proof make a cover-up seem more likely or less?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it, for me? I think the most compelling aspect is how this whole subject forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge, both about the universe and about how we determine what's true. Does the lack of proof mean it isn't happening, or does it mean that concealment is incredibly effective? Logically, it could be either, but extraordinary claims usually require extraordinary evidence.
And that evidence, so far, seems to be missing.
Largely, yes. Which leaves us with fascinating speculation, enduring mysteries, and a reminder of how strongly we're drawn to the idea of conquering time itself.
A perfect place to leave it, perhaps. Thank you. This has been a really illuminating discussion.
It has indeed. Always a pleasure to unpack these complex ideas.
And thanks to you, our listener, for joining us on this deep dive.
Hope you found it interesting.
Thanks for listening to Conspiracist.